Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hi everyone, my name is Dhanika and I'm your co-host today along with Brendon from The Office. And you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Brendon, hey, how you been?
Hey Dhanika, I'm good, how are you?
Pretty good. You just got back from holidays, didn't you?
Yeah, like yesterday I just got, on Tuesday I got off a cruise boat.
Oh, house trip?
It was really, really nice to just take a break and just get away from society in general. And just,
Sounds like
yeah, it was really lovely. I had a good time and it was my very first cruise, so I was pretty impressed with,
I have never even been on a cruise, so that's awesome.
Well, it's the accessibility of it was what I was really impressed with. I thought I would have so much drama, but no, I basically could get everywhere across the ship, and they really went out of their way to make sure that I enjoyed my cruise and my time, and we had a blast. So yeah, I'm already planning my next one.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds like you definitely had a sweet time. Was that through your respite, STA?
No. So this was just something that I'd been looking at doing for some considerable time, and I just managed to oh, yep, you know what, I'm actually going to do it instead of talking about it. Just do it. So we did it, and yeah, no regrets. I had so much fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you had a good time. Anyway, we should probably move forward. We do have an important topic to cover today, and it's not NDIS property.property/respite. But today we're here to discuss the Disability Royal Commission. So the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability. So yeah, they came out recently with their final report with their vision for an inclusive Australia and their recommendations. So Brendon, have you read this report?
I have read bits and pieces, but it is quite a very lengthy report. It only came out late last week, so I haven't really had much time to digest the whole thing. But I've picked up on a few little bits and pieces. But yeah, I hope we.
I don't blame you. That is not a small document.
Yeah, no, I've never read anything quite as big as that before in my life. But some of the little things that I've seen through it is quite interesting, and we can touch on that through our podcast.
Yeah, definitely. I've only skimmed the surface. Yeah, so I'll generally take you as well, more the expert on this, and let you take the lead a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some points to cover. But yeah, so we'll start with, so they made a lot of recommendations by the look. So 222 from what I've found.
Yeah, it's quite a massive list of recommendations.
Yeah, definitely. And they've made changes to all kinds of things. But we'll start with, so actually, where do you want to start? Schools and education, or?
Yeah, I think that's really key because, we all start life at school, and that's how we all learn. So one of the big key recommendations that came from that is that the Royal Commission has recommended that students with disabilities no longer be placed in special education schools or special education units. They be integrated into mainstream education as part of the inclusion process of that. And the aim of that is to have every student in a mainstream classroom by 2035, I believe, according to the report. So that's still quite a little way away, and I guess we have to have consultation with the education departments, and because every state's different, every state,
Yeah, no,
has
that makes
their
sense.
own way of doing things. So I think the disability community and the education departments need to have consultations about how to go about implementing that and how that will work. The one thing that sort of flagged me a little bit with that is the fact that classroom sizes are already big enough now, and like they're quite huge, and teachers are under all sorts of enormous pressure to ensure that their classrooms run smoothly. And I guess we need to see how the education departments are going to cope with being able to keep students tracking their learning really well while kind of trying to deal with students with complex needs, because a lot of students with complex needs and disabilities really do struggle, and at times it can be quite difficult and confronting for teachers to handle. So I think they need to look at how they're going to manage that, because especially if teachers are not properly trained in working with students with special needs, is there going to be a second teacher in the classroom, or is that teacher that's going to be in that classroom specifically trained for students with special needs?
Yeah, okay. I hope they don't really rush this implementation, because that could have some real detrimental effects on the kids, really.
Yeah, I don't want to see a quick rollout like the NDIS at all, because we know we know what happened there, and I definitely don't want to see that, and I'm sure parents don't want to see that either. But I think this is a win for parents. I think this is a win for students too, and this will help students understand other students with disabilities, and may even reduce the amount of bullying that goes on in schools because someone is different. Because what we know, the kids that aren't normally integrated with people, with other kids with disabilities, they kind of find it like it's like a different world to them, and a lot of bullying occurs from that because they're just not used to having someone different in their classroom. So this could actually create some positive outcomes in terms of lowering the bullying rate, and have better students with disabilities can feel comfortable and be able to make a lot of friends with mainstream with mainstream students, and we haven't got that bullying issue.
Yeah, no, that makes sense as well. I've also just come across a little tidbit. So apparently 3 of the commissioners recommended this, but three other commissioners did not support the shutting down of special schools. And they suggested stronger relationships be formed between mainstream and special schools, including the mixing of classes where practical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, because I know from I graduated 20-something years ago, so quite a long time ago, and I was part of a pilot program where people with disabilities were only just starting to be integrated into mainstream education. So I did start off at a special school, but I was told that I was actually way too good for a special school, and that I needed a mainstream education, and I went from a special school straight into a state school system where I was the only person at the school with a disability, and it was a completely new world for me, and it was a completely new world for the school. So we were both learning at the same time, and a lot of issues were occurring. Like, I didn't have proper access to classrooms, or there wasn't even an accessible bathroom in the school at the time. So it was very brand new, whereas now it's actually law and mandatory that every school now must have accessible, but not only accessible bathrooms, but every classroom must be accessible for a student with a disability. So you could say that it's come a long way, but yet there is so much more to do. And this Royal Commission is just another positive step in that direction.
Definitely. Yeah, okay. Shall we move on to the next topic, if you like?
Yep.
What have I've got here employment and jobs. So I think, so the commissioners, or 4 commissioners are recommending phasing out segregation from employment as well. Did you touch on this one as well?
I think this is a great recommendation. We are starting to see a lot of businesses out there already starting to, employ people with disabilities. And I think that this is great. I think also I'm a strong believer in, if you do the work, you should get paid the right amount
Oh,
of
absolutely.
money, the work that you do, despite your disability or not. I know that recently there was a push that people with disabilities would get paid a lesser amount based on their capabilities. I'm a strong advocate for not that process.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there.
I believe if you are a paid employee and you're contributing to society, you should get paid the same equal amount of money as any other able-bodied employer at all. And I think that we need to start looking. Other businesses need to start looking at employing people with disabilities, especially organizations like large corporations, like airlines, for example, and really large corporations that you see a lot around all the time, but yet you don't see much of their, you don't see many people with disabilities working for them. And I know Bunnings is a massive contributor to employing people with disabilities. They actually have their own program, and I follow a couple of TikTok people that actually, they both work at Bunnings and they both have a disability and they love their job. Statistics have shown people with disabilities are more likely to turn up to work and enjoy their job and love their job because they feel like they're being a part of something. And it's really good to see. I know years ago, my local Coles, there was a lady working in there, and she had Down syndrome, and her whole main focus was the pet feed section and the pet toys section, and she kept that area totally immaculate, and it looked, and the facing with the products and the shelving, she actually had like the best looked the area that was the most outstanding, the most impressive, well presented area that I'd ever seen in a supermarket. And that's because she took pride in her work because people believed in her and gave her an opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And there are heaps of companies out there that are implementing things to help people with disabilities, etc., just to support them. And of course, I mean, I've had those kinds of experiences too, where I was actually let go from a job about a week after I mentioned that I had a mental health crisis many years ago. And I thought that was ridiculous because, I mean, there are other companies that I work for, like EB Games, for instance, that have things in place for people with disabilities and people going through psychological issues and everything. And I think those are wonderful companies that really look at everything that's going on here and do whatever they can to help their employees. And that's how it should be, in my opinion.
Like you said with EB Games, there are a lot of companies that make games that employ people who are on the spectrum that love gaming and that they have so much attention to detail.
Yeah, that makes
stuff that they're actually better than an able-bodied person at doing the job, and that's no offense to anyone, but it's proven that they are so unique and they do an absolute amazing job. And yeah, it goes to show that you shouldn't really look at a person's disability. You should look at their ability.
Yeah. What I find also ridiculous in terms of what's been happening all this time. So in terms of phasing out segregated employment, it also includes things like Australian Disability Enterprises, also known as ADEs, and they're apparently a type of workplace. Now, I didn't even know this, but they could legally pay people with disability as little as $2.50 per hour.
Correct.
How did this exist? Honestly,
That is correct. So
that's like sweatshop work.
Yeah, my understanding is that when you do a work assessment through if you go through Centrelink and you're a person with a disability and you go through a work assessment or work ready, it's actually called a work readiness assessment. And what they do is they test your capability on what you're able to do and what you're not able to do, but they will only pay you for the level that you are able and capable of doing. They won't pay you anything more. And I strongly think that is disgusting, and it's really, to be in a country like Australia,
we're supposed to be a first world nation,
Exactly, but yet we're paying people with disabilities far less, which means that we are treating them far less than they actually deserve, and we're not really giving them a fair go. And that needs to change. And I think the Fair Work Australia needs to step in and go, hey, you need to treat people with disabilities who become employed exactly the same as your able-bodied employees and pay them correctly.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone should be getting paid correctly, no matter their level of ability, as long as they're doing their job. Absolutely.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, continuing on, I guess.
Yeah.
So the commissioners are all recommending phasing out group homes as well, which we already kind of know is happening through NDIS as well. Did you want to touch on that too?
Yes. Group homes. Group homes in the late 70s and 80s, probably even 60s, or even 90s, massive problems with people getting abused by carers. A lot of isolation was occurring. People were becoming withdrawn, and the group home didn't really feel like a home. It was more like a workplace because that's where the carers worked, and that was basically the system that it was. Basically, if you're a person with a disability and you lived in a group home, to a lot of people, you amounted to nothing. You were just put away and didn't have much of an opportunity to excel in life. And I think now we have the introduction of the NDIS and stuff like that, where participants can now live on their own and like have those sorts of options, different types of living options. Like we've come a long way in such a short time that participants, that people with disabilities are now starting to get better living choice at times. And I know, for example, if you lived in a regional area and you were put in you were going to a special school, a lot of those students were placed in those group homes on school campus during the term, and then they'd only come home on the holidays. But there was so much abuse going on, it was astronomical. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Royal Commission was formed in the first place. Group homes were such a big problem, and I can't wait for the day that a group home actually becomes non-existent in this country, and that people with disabilities live a more happy and comfortable life. And I think the NDIS has sort of led the way with this. They've sort of become like the designers of how people with disabilities live now. And like we have you have the choice. You have the choice now of whether you want to live with other people or you want to live by yourself. Whereas back in those days, you didn't have a choice. You were, this is where you live, that is it, and sometimes...
And it doesn't sound like somewhere you live. It's like, it just sounded like institutionalized abuse, like that. Oof.
100%. And when you get into institutions like that, it is very hard, especially if you've been living in something like that for like 15 to 20 years, and you do, eventually integrate into, your own, place. It's often a lot of the time, the people would just end up back in the institution because that's all they know, and that's how life was back then. Yeah, but now we're starting to see it change for the better. Like I said before, I can't wait for the day where we have absolutely group homes are non-existent and everybody is living happily in whatever situation they choose to live in.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. And I'm really glad that, I'm really just glad that the NDIS is actually doing something about this side of it, really, and driving it.
But in saying that, though, the NDIS for a little while was fitting out shared accommodation approvals. And they were sort of like, oh, yep, we want people to live, together, because it was cheaper. And I don't think the NDIS fully understood what was happening with the Royal Commission. They were like, oh, I sort of think the NDIS sort of turned a blind eye to the Royal Commission, because I started seeing like in life, it's a circle, right? It reverts back to where it was, and I believe the NDIS started to head down that path of going back to the old institutionalized setting. But now that we've had a change of government since then, and the government has sort of waken up and said, this needs to change. The NDIS was a Labour initiative, and they never actually got a chance to manage the scheme as such because they lost that election. But now they have the scheme and they've turned it around, and like me, they wanted me to live with other people, and I was like, no, not having it. So so now we've turned a positive corner. We just need to stay on that positive trajectory in terms of home and living. And that is so crucial to a person's disability with their development in their life as well.
Absolutely, and having that choice and control over everything as well.
Yeah. That's a big key thing. Choice and control. That's key to all of this. Not just NDIS, but the Royal Commission as well.
Yeah, okay. We'll move on now to, I guess, the laws and human rights. Did you look at, because they're changing some of the laws and things as well?
No, I haven't really looked into that path. Maybe you could shed some light on what you picked up, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, so the Commission has recommended some new laws and statutory bodies to protect the human rights of people with disabilities. So these will include, first of all, creating a new Disability Rights Act as soon as possible. So that makes sense, definitely. And it's to translate the international human rights of people with disabilities into Australian laws. So this is through the UN, I guess, and trying to align with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think a new act needs to be written and designed for Australia, for our way of life and our culture and stuff. I think this is a major step forward into improving the lives of people with disabilities. I think, though, when we're writing the legislation, it shouldn't be rushed, and it needs to be co-designed with people with disabilities themselves, because, no one understands a disability better than a person with a disability. So I think, this needs to be, whether the Royal Commission would look at, or no, sorry, not the Royal, the government would look at appointing some people with disabilities to,
well, they are, they're establishing a new National Disability Commission. So that'll be an independent statutory authority with the power to address breaches of this Disability Rights Act as well. And I would absolutely hope that does have people with disabilities in it because of exactly what you just said.
Yeah. I mean, it's vital. It's key. I mean, we talk about lived experience, and this is exactly where lived experience plays a huge part. And yeah.
They're also saying they're setting up a new complaints mechanism. So, and this, it says, also has been co-designed with people with disabilities as well. So that definitely makes sense because it makes that, it will make it more accessible, I guess. Sometimes it's really difficult to navigate these things, even if you don't have a disability. But
like everything disability related needs somebody with a disability to design it and run it, because otherwise you're a group of, you're like deer running into headlights, really, because you have no clue of what unless you live a life with a person with a disability, you have absolutely no clue of what they go through on a day-to-day basis. So what you're saying, we are so heading, if this is true, we are heading in the right direction right now. Yeah.
And this will touch on what we was talking about earlier in terms of schools and, the segregation and changing all that, how quickly they're doing it. But so they're saying they're creating a new national disability agreement, so between the federal, state and territory governments, to strengthen the collaboration surrounding these issues. And basically, based on what you were saying earlier with the education systems, how they're different in each state and things like that, I guess it really makes sense to have this so that it does collaborate properly and everyone does get the right education for a start. I think.
I think a national approach to this is exactly what is needed, because, like I said, every state is different and every state might not agree with each other. But I think this is one area where they all need to, work together and collaborate really well and co-design really well and then implement really well and then not go 100 paces and then because steps will be missed, things will be missed, and then that's when people with disabilities will fall through the cracks. We've seen that with the NDIS rollout. So
Certainly.
I hope whoever puts all this together looks at what happened with the NDIS and go, we're gonna do this completely different, and we're gonna take what we've learned and we're gonna make it better. That's really important here. We need to learn from our lessons, and the NDIS is one lesson that we should be learning from when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, and it'll show us really how to go about things without letting things slip through the cracks like that. It's just, it really needs to be a lot better thought out, all of it. And I guess that's also, I mean, in saying that, they are bringing these changes in by what they said 2035, didn't they?
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll give them enough time to figure it all out.
Yeah.
Make sure it happens in a way that, actually helps everyone as well.
One thing that I think we really need to be aware of with all of these is we are now going to have, so we have the NDIS, and now we have the Royal Commission final report and the recommendations. I want to see how the NDIS and the recommendations, how they're going to work together, because I think if we have two different systems, and it's like, it will be so hard to implement NDIS legislation while trying to understand the new disability, the new act that they're wanting to put together. I think I want to know how it's going to impact on the NDIS, whether those recommendations are going to be a part of the NDIS or not, because I think it's really important that we try and keep everything together, and we make sure that it works with both governing bodies, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I fully understand you. Definitely plenty of work to be done, that's for sure. I mean, there's plenty that we need to look over as well. I mean, they did come out with 222 recommendations, and I know we haven't read them all yet. But I think we should maybe cut it short there. Well, sorry. Yeah.
And maybe we could do a part 2, a little bit further on down the track, and look at some other recommendations that they've made, and then make some comments on that. I think that's really, really important that we probably do another session on this and look at other parts of other recommendations from the Royal Commission.
Absolutely, and I'm sure soon enough we'll find out which ones will be applied as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess that's all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed listening, and we'll catch you next time on the SDA Housing Podcast. Thank you, Brendon.
Thank you, Dhanika.
And we'll see you later.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.